You pull into the range with 45 minutes until you have to be somewhere, so you buy a large bucket, head to the nearest stall, dump the balls out, and then realize you have no clue what you're supposed to work on. So you probably hit some wedges till those feel good, maybe a 7-iron until that feels good, rip a few drivers, realize you're running late, and sprint out of there. Unfortunately, this is how most golfers practice, and it's also why most scores never change. When you finish this video, I can promise that you will be equipped with the knowledge and the tools needed so that you can get better at golf with the limited time that you have. I've got a complete guide that you can fill out. It's 13 pages long, and we'll be referencing that throughout. So make sure you download that. Link is down below. The guy from the intro who hit a bunch of range balls and was wondering if he just got tired or actually got better, that's you and me. Golf is a game. So ultimately the goal is to have fun. But you know what's really fun? Shooting lower scores and knowing that the practice time that you're putting in is affecting those scores. Most things it's easier to measure if you got better or not. For example, go into the weight room. You're going to know if you got stronger or not pretty quickly. Even if you're not specifically tracking, all the weights have a number on them. It's a little harder to do that in golf. And that feeling when you leave the golf course or leave the range, when you feel like it was productive, can absolutely lie to you if you have no measurement. We tend to practice what feels bad. Like, for example, if my chipping feels bad and I go practice that for 90% of the practice time that I have this next week, well, chipping is only 15% of my scoring, and everybody's scoring on average. So I'm spending the majority of my time on something that felt off, but in reality doesn't affect my scores that much. So these range sessions where we don't really have a plan, you might get better, you might get worse, you might groove a great swing, you might groove a terrible swing. We have no real way of knowing, at least we didn't beforehand. Volume is incredibly important when it comes to improvement in any area. You've got to get the reps in, but just because you have reps doesn't mean that you're getting better. Those reps have to have intent. For example, if you go hit 100 golf balls with your 7-iron to the same target with an alignment stick, you might be grooving a motion, sure, but that's not going to directly impact your ability to hit a knockdown 7-iron when you need to, or be able to draw one around a tree when you need to. You're just getting really good at exercise. And let's be real, golf isn't a big endurance sport, so that's not something we necessarily need to train for. Let me give you an example of crappy volume, even when I could have used that time wisely. In college, I kind of fell into the trap of trying to understand how far each club went and what the dispersion was. And the way that I went about doing that was these big sessions where I'd hit on GC quad. Throughout that session, I was just basically hitting 30 to 35 of each club and then removing some outliers and getting the averages. What I've come to realize is that that was borderline useless because I understood what the stock shot was, but how often was I going to get that stock shot? I wasn't prepping for real golf where you have to take some speed off, or you've got to flight it, or you got to hit it high. What you'll find is bad practice sessions lack intent. And you'll hear me reference block versus random practice a lot. Block practice, based on scientific studies, is best for building a movement or a motion. So block practice builds your swing, but then random practice is best for testing it and for long-term retention of that movement. So back to me wasting a ton of time. Once I figured out that random targets, random flights, random clubs was not only going to be more efficient, but more effective, you best believe that's the majority of what I do now. And honestly, it's helped a ton. I mean, I played the first round of the year yesterday with my brother-in-law. We had a blast, just 9 holes at a local course here, and I shot 31 with a bogey. I haven't stepped on a golf course since December in Florida, but I've been hitting the random targets, changing up clubs, and I felt significantly more prepared to go play golf as opposed to play golf swing. There are 3 signs that showcase if your practice is efficient and effective or not. The first is you decide what to work on after you've dumped out the range bucket. The second is that you hit the same club over and over and over again until it feels good, and then you move to the next one. And the third is that you have no way to measure whether or not that session worked. Back to me hitting a gajillion golf balls on GC quad. I had no way of knowing whether that session worked or not. I had no intent behind the practice other than finding out how far my 7-iron went on a stock shot when I hit it 35 times, which was useless. All the studies I mentioned throughout this video will be linked below. But the main idea here is that this random practice is going to be significantly harder in the moment, and it's going to feel worse. But it is going to be much better when you get out to the golf course and have to pull that shot out of a hat or out of your brain. If we can't trust our previous practice sessions or even our previous rounds to tell us what we're good at and what we're not, what can we trust? Well, we need some kind of objective data. And most golfers either track the wrong thing or track nothing. The wrong thing would be fairways hit, total putts, greens hit. Those numbers can feel useful. They're simple to write down. They're kind of simple to remember, and you can point back and say, oh, I had 29 putts today. I putted great. Those traditional stats can kind of mask what's actually going on. Fairways hit is a complete lie, not because hitting fairways is good or bad. Like hitting fairways is good, but a missed fairway 20 yards off the fairway versus 60 yards off the fairway are measured the exact same. And now you have no context for if you drove it in play, if you drove it into an area that is good. Like there was a hole in college where I intentionally missed the fairway every single time. Big blue number, what was it? 18, 17, 16, 15 at University of Kentucky, big blue, hit it in the right rough every single time. Doesn't mean it was a terrible drive because left was water. But left and right there were measured the same if I was using fairways. Greens and regulation. If I hit it to 5 feet, that's measured the same way that it is if I hit it to 100 feet. And missing the green, if I hit it in the water, is measured the same as hitting it 2 inches off the green into the fringe. And total putts is going to completely lie to you because, once again, it's measuring a 100-foot 2-putt the same as it's measuring a 3-foot 2-putt. So what should you measure? And you can kind of mark down on page 5 the area that you're supposed to be working on, but I would argue you should be measuring tee shots in play that have a clean second shot at the green. For all approach shots inside 150 yards, track your total score. Track how many chips you hit into 20 feet or less. Track how many putts it takes you from outside of 30 feet, and track your total putts inside of 8 feet. Here's why. If I hit it off the tee in play with a clean second shot, that's basically a fairway. If I keep my scoring average low relative to my handicap group from 150 yards and in, that's an easy way to get better at golf. If I'm chipping it within 20 feet, that means that I'm not missing the green and I'm at least giving myself a chance at making a putt. And then worst case scenario, I'm tapping in the next one. If I'm 2-putting from outside of 30 feet every single time, I'm not losing shots. If anything, I'm gaining them. And if I'm putting from inside of 8 feet and beating my benchmark that you'll be able to see in that practice guide, these are all simple ways for you to measurably get better at golf and lower your scores by keeping very simple stats. It takes the same amount of time as if you're writing down fairways, greens, and putts. Now we can get a little bit more into the weeds with full strokes gained. This is where you're tracking where every single shot lands. Once again, it doesn't really take a lot of time. You just got to be a little bit more intentional with keeping track of how far away you are from the hole. But this really starts to tell you where you struggle. Like I know because I've been keeping strokes gained for years that I really struggle from 100 to 125 yards. That's always kind of been my weak point. Because of that, and because I understand that approach play is incredibly important for scoring, I now spend a lot of time working from 100 to 125 yards. So that's where I'd go into this self-assessment, and in approach shots, I'd fill out 100 to 125 yards if I was keeping strokes gained. Now, there's a ton of great stuff out there that keeps, Arccos just released yesterday a little device. It's $350. You keep it in your pocket, and it keeps strokes gained for you. You don't have to put anything on your clubs. That is a game changer. In fact, I'm going to be trying to order one very shortly. Those simple stats are awesome for identifying which area of your game is struggling or not, but strokes gained is going to give you a very nice idea of what you actually need to be working on and what's actually affecting scoring, because we know what overall affects scoring from a general populace standpoint. Approach play, putting, off the tee, chipping, those don't really change. But if you're significantly deficient in one of those areas, or you significantly rely on one of those areas, we want to spend more time there. And strokes gained allows us to get granular within each one of those categories. So now that we have an understanding of what we're doing well and what we're not doing well, we need to take a look at the facilities that we have access to and the amount of time that we have during the week. In that practice guide, check off what you have available access to regularly. Now, this can change throughout the year. For example, you might not have a driving range during the winter because it's freezing. But start with the facilities you have access to, because this is going to allow you to structure your time a lot wiser. For example, if you have access to a putting green, but only 30 minutes a week, I want you to spend the majority of your short putting time inside. That way, when you get outside, you can use that time to work on lag putting as opposed to wasting your time on something you could have been doing throughout the week. Once you've marked down what facilities you've access to, mark down the amount of time that you have during the week. Now, this is where we can get a little bit aggressive with, I'm going to have 3 hours a week to practice. Move it down one section and just try to get that done really well. And then if as you're going, you want to rebuild around the more time that you have, you're realizing you actually have 3 hours a week versus 2, then go in and fill that out. Finally, we want to take a look at what season we're in. What you'll find once you do this for a few years is you're going to get in a nice cycle. Like I know late November, I can start working on speed again, start working on trying to strength train a little bit more, start working on some of those weird weaknesses that I maybe had during the year. Whereas in season, I'm going to significantly change my practice to get the ball in play, work on maybe some knockdown flighted shots, and really get my putting dialed. Now that you've got that, you can flip over to that other page and fill out your 3 practice priorities, which is going to allow you to take that time that you just said that you had during the week and break it down slot by slot. Now, if you feel like chipping is the worst area, this is the only place where I'm going to kind of tell you what to do. Move that down to secondary focus at best, maybe even maintenance, because like we said, chipping isn't really that important for scoring. This is going to allow you to take the time that you need to get better at things or maintain them based on where you're at currently. Now, I want to reiterate, if you haven't been keeping stats, don't necessarily just fill this out based on feelings. Just go based on approach play, putting, off the tee, and chipping. And then as you start keeping stats, you can adjust things. If you just have 15 minutes, focus on your primary skill that you're trying to develop. If you just have 30 minutes, spend 20 minutes on your primary goal and 10 minutes on your secondary goal. And if you got 60 minutes, you can spread that time evenly. So you'll have about 30 minutes of your primary goal, 15 to 20 minutes of your secondary goal, and 10 minutes on your maintenance areas. Now, just because you can work on more things during a longer session does not mean that you should just batch all this stuff into one big session each week. 3 20-minute sessions across the week will produce significantly better improvement than one 60-minute session at the very end of the week. There's a ton of data around this. Once again, studies will be below. But the main learning from this research is that your brain consolidates motor learning in between sessions, not necessarily during them. So the bigger the gaps between sessions, the more that you're going to lose. This is great news for you and I, because this means those little 5-minute putting sessions between meetings are stacking up, and we're getting significantly better than the guy who just spends 60 minutes once a week. This is where you get to get creative. For example, I talk a ton about how I roll a bunch of putts in this little 9-foot space right here, and that's helped me a lot. I've got one of these weighted swing trainers back there that's really short, so these are 8-foot drop ceilings, but I can still swing a club in here. You just got to get creative, because we have priorities, we have budgets, we have time budgets. But your practice shouldn't look the same in January as it does in July. Reality is most golfers do kind of the same thing all year, and it's probably that same crappy thing we were talking about earlier, but the practice doesn't necessarily adjust. Maybe it just shrinks or expands, but the time slots within don't really change at all. Now, as you go throughout the years, you're going to find what works best for you here, but I want to give you some kind of structure to start with so that you can maybe spend the next year working on this and then fine tune it for yourself, but I think it's pretty good. We'll start in the off season from November to February and shift these times around based on where you live too. But your off season should be 60% on your primary weakness, about 30% on your secondary weakness, and then 10% on whatever you're trying to maintain. This is a great time to make swing changes as well with the PGA professional, because you've got some time to work on block practice as opposed to scoring. And then as you're building that motion, you can begin to test it with random practice in a controlled environment. This is also like my favorite time to throw on a hoodie, roll putts in here, chip around the house, take swings with that weighted swing trainer, because the mindset in the off season is that you're not necessarily trying to score lower. You're just trying to improve your processes. You're trying to get more fit. You're trying to get faster. You're trying to improve your swing with a PGA professional. You're trying to build a foundation so that when you go into the year, you're well prepared to start working on scoring. And this is one of those things that I think a lot of people get wrong, is they think I work so hard on the off season, I should come out better. But the problem is in the offseason, it's hard to work on scoring, which is the most important skill for shooting lower scores. And so we come out with maybe some more skills, but one of those skills that's missing is scoring. So how do we begin working on that during the quote unquote preseason or early season of March and April? We're going to spend about 40% of our time on our primary goal, our primary weakness. We're going to spend 30% of our time on what I'm going to call swing rust removal. So that means we're going and playing golf, or we're working on solid contact off of grass, or curving the ball the right amount with driver. And then we're going to spend 30% of our time on short game in general. So this is going to be a lot of up and down drills, a lot of chipping from inside of 30 yards and putting out. Effectively, we're trying to simulate as much golf as possible, or play as much golf as possible if you're lucky. This is also a great time to start keeping stats. I know it can be really tough to keep stats when you're not playing up to your potential, but stats are only good if you keep them all the time. If you only keep stats during your good times, well, then you're not going to know what you're actually supposed to work on. So the mindset transitions from building during the offseason to testing during the season. We're trying to test if that build worked or not, and then we can go back and make little refinements or figure out what's going to be required from us for the rest of the season to get the ball in the hole as quick as possible. Because once we get into the swing and things in season, we do not want to be thinking about our swing. So May to September, we're really trying to get dialed on scoring. This means we're spending 50% of our time on putting and then a little bit of that on chipping and up and down drills, because that's where you're going to notice the biggest variance in your scoring. So if you want to go deep, you've got to get a hot putter. We're going to spend about 30% of our time on swing maintenance. So making sure that our alignment's good, our tempo's good, our posture's good, our grip's good. And then we're going to spend 20% of our time on scoring drills. So a lot of random practice. This is all about maintaining and sharpening. I think that one of the most frustrating things to see on the range is some guy grinding on his physical swing in August. It's like, man, the goal is to get the ball in the hole as fast as possible. And I promise you've played enough golf to where you can go out and work on the scoring aspect and save the swing stuff for the off season, because you're wasting precious time while it's warm out. A lot of these drills that you should be doing during this time should have consequences. A lot of the drills that you do during this time should have consequences, or there should be limits on how many balls you can hit. So I'm trying to hit 4 out of 5 balls to this target within this zone. And if I don't do it, I don't do it. I failed. Our whole mindset is score. We're trying to play with our flaws, not fix them. Because ultimately, you're never going to play perfect golf. I mean, we're in the middle of a stretch right now where Scotty Scheffler is struggling hard, and he looked unbeatable for the past few years. So golf is really hard. Take it easy on yourself. And keep in mind that the goal is just to get the ball in the hole as fast as possible. There are 0 pictures on scorecards. And during this time, make sure that you're keeping your stats, because as we move into the final part of the season, this is where we can begin to assess the stats from the full year, continue to keep them, and have a plan for the off season. I look at that October range as kind of the bonus golf season. I'm trying to assess where my game was at. I'm trying to set new goals for next year, trying to enjoy the warm weather while I still have it. I'm writing down what I'm doing really, really well, and I'm writing down what I'm not doing so well. Even if it's just in your notes app, keep track. The mindset during this time period should be an honest assessment of the year. What did I actually get better at? What did I not get better at? And how can I use my limited time and resources in the off season to get better at those things? At the end of each month throughout the year, you should be asking yourself 2 big questions. Number 1, has my pattern in scoring or in strokes gained shifted? And number 2, am I practicing what I'm supposed to be practicing, or am I practicing what's comfortable? Because it is really fun to go to the range and just hit a bunch of 7-irons to one target and try to wear out the middle of that club. I did that for years. I took pride in trying to wear out a 7-iron every single year. Doing these little assessments at the end of each month allows your plan to change as it needs to. Your plan really shouldn't be static because your game isn't static. So you've got the big picture. We know what season we're in. We know what we need to be working on. We know what priorities are. But let's zoom in a little bit and take a look at what each session should look like. We've mentioned kind of generally random practice, block practice, all this stuff, but let's talk about it specifically. Each great practice session starts with your phone in your hand, typing in your notes app, or a pencil or a pen and a notebook. Because if you can't really articulate what you're supposed to be practicing when you walk into buy that bucket of range balls, it's probably not going to be a great range session. Now, part of the practice planner down below is these session planners. You can write down the date, time. Those are just fun to keep track of. But the facilities that you're going to have access to, the phase that you're in, and what the focus is for the day. We start with what you're good and bad at, the facilities you have access to, and the time that you have, because those are the constraints that we're trying to work within. And if we understand the constraints, then we can be specific about what we're supposed to be doing during the week. And if we're specific about what we're supposed to do, we can also measure those things. It's hard to measure something that you're not really sure that you're doing. There's a little bit of guidance on how you should structure your year, but I would encourage you to fill that out, because that's going to allow you to understand what you're supposed to work on right now and be incredibly intentional about that. And if you write all this down throughout the year, not only does it give you something to look back on in a year, but it also gives you some form of accountability that you know where you're going. Those first few minutes should be a warm-up of every single session, especially if you're like me and you're sitting in a chair like this every single day. We got to get the body moving. Get those hamstrings firing, get the glutes firing, shout out to Tiger. And then if you've got to work on something specific, like my right shoulder's kind of rough, so I take some more time to get that loose with the band. This is where we're going to spend that block time working on setup, start line, posture, grip, alignment, tempo. Now we're going to work into skill block number 1, which no matter how much time you have, this is where you're going to spend the most of it. In that block, you can see there's drill/exercise. So what drill specifically are you doing? Constraint. So what is the constraint that you're working within? If it's driver, how wide is my fairway? If you're working on irons, how tight is my target? Reps. So how many total shots did you hit? And then score, which is going to be how many successful attempts did you make. So let's start with off the tee. This is a really simple one. Alternate between 2 different fairways downrange that you build, make the fairways wider or tighter based on your skill level, and then alternate even shot shapes or clubs if you want to make it more difficult. Approach play, you can just ask ChatGPT for 10 to 20 random numbers between 100 and 200, or whatever your wedge and your 4-iron go, and you're just going to play to those numbers. And once again, there's a bunch of baselines that I'll include in this practice planner. Around the green, I would actually go from the same spot and chip to 3 different targets. So take 3 balls, drop them all in the same spot, chip to 3 different targets. Keep track of how many you get within 8 feet, because from 8 feet, you're going to be somewhere between probably 30 and 40% make rate, depending on your skill level, unless you're a tour player, in which case you're going to make half of them. And then putting, you can kind of do the same thing we did with approach play, where you ask for 18 random numbers between 3 and 35, or however long of a putt you can hit on your putting green, and go play that as a course, all par 2s. And all those you can progressively overload. You can make them harder or easier. You can easily track if you're successful or not. And you can change the amount of balls that you have based on the amount of time that you have. Now, I included a cooldown on here, and you can use it to cool down if you want, but really it's just some built-in extra time so that if you're moving between stations, you're not running out of time. Just because you planned for 45 minutes doesn't mean that you have 45 minutes to actually practice. Then post-session, you can look back at not only the scores that you had during that session, but I also want you to ask a few other questions of yourself. Did you stick to the plan? Were you paying attention the whole time? And what would you change the next time you did this kind of practice session? As we've been testing that app that I talked about, I have been incredibly intentional about my practice because A, I'm filming content for said app, or I'm using drills from the app to film content. And then I'm also testing the app. So I'm pressure testing all these drills in a controlled environment. And like I mentioned earlier, I mean, I played really, really good in my first round since I've been very committed to using the app. That whole app is a more streamlined version of what we're talking about here. It's the same principles. So all you have to do is stick to this. Now there's 4 sessions that you can fill out in there. I thought, best case scenario, you're practicing 4 times during the week, and then you can either copy those, you can copy and paste them in your iPad or whatever. I don't know how people are going to use this. Everything that you need to know to get better at golf with limited time is in this video. However, I also know something about you because, like we've established, you're probably like me with a really busy schedule and not a ton of time to maybe go fill this out. You'll probably download it, which is awesome. Thank you. And hopefully you fill it out, but honestly, most of you won't. It'll sit in your downloads folder until you decide to clear it out a year from now. Or you might get halfway through it because building a plan from scratch takes some honest work. You've got to look back at your game honestly and assess it. You've got to look at the amount of time that you have. You have to be honest with yourself about the facilities you have access to. And so for that small percentage of you that actually fill this out and actually follow it, you're going to get so much better at golf, and I cannot wait to hear those stories. But for the rest of you, like I mentioned, that app takes care of everything. It is the simplest way to get strokes gained using the least amount of clicks. It then takes those strokes gained versus your baseline, takes into account the facilities you've access to, the amount of time that you have, and builds a 4-week practice plan based on all of that. Not only does each one of those drills come with a video that shows you what you're supposed to do and a description, but it also has a little box with what you're supposed to be shooting for that session. And then you can fill it out and progressively overload because the app remembers what you did. And if you get some extra time in those 4-week sessions, or you've got a random 15 minutes here or there, you can build a quick session. And those quick sessions are built on the same principles that this whole thing talked about. And whether you use this or the app, 15 minutes with a plan beats an hour without one. And if you want your friends to also get better at golf, which I know not everybody wants to, go and share it with them as well, because every single golfer who practices with a plan is going to win. If you've got any questions on this, you can email me, Isaak, ISAAK, @playready.golf. Shoot me a DM on Instagram. I don't know, find me on LinkedIn. I don't care. Download the practice planner or download the app, use your free week trial, and don't go watch this video.